Hey guys, Tom here. What do you look for in a phone? Camera quality, build quality, SD card capability, maybe a headphone jack. These are all burning questions for myself when I look for phones. Personally, I cannot stand when a phone doesn't have an SD card slot and a headphone jack. Those to me are important, but what is a phone for you? Do you only want to use it to call people, to document special moments? Let's clear all of that for you. Let's focus on the grassroots. A cell phone. What do we use it for? I'm sure almost everyone uses it to communicate. Let's put that as our main priority. Communication. Well, every phone has an ability to communicate. What's next then? Taking photos. I think everyone wants to capture special moments with clarity and focus, but that doesn't mean we have to go all in with the cameras. You don't really have to go over the top with 200 megapixel cameras and all that stuff, you know? These things are just a fad. They're just things to entice you. It's a marketing thing, you know? Big number equals good, but really, for the most part, it doesn't matter that much. You can be happy with 12 megapixels. Hell, 99% of selfie cameras on cell phones don't really have that much of a high megapixel count, but you still see great pictures. Maybe you just have really bad photography skills. Kidding aside, look, the latest iPhone 15 Pro has just 12 megapixels with the front camera, and the latest Samsung flagship phone has about the same. Sometimes it's not about the hardware, it's about the software, especially in the case of images, software processing. Moving on, we have the chipset. Now we don't have to worry as much with this, especially if you're not really big into gaming or heavy loads with a phone. I mean, it's a phone. It's not like we're going to mine or render computer-sized workloads with it, and sure, you might game a bit, but what kind of games are you gonna play anyway? Most of those don't even need top-of-the-line chipsets. And why don't you want a headphone jack? It's really convenient, you know, especially for people who prefer wired paraphernalia. Nowadays, you have to use a dongle for your 3.5mm headphone or earphones, or just straight up use a USB-C headset. How are you gonna charge and listen to things now? Wireless charging? Sure, but that heats up phones like the fucking sun, and not every phone is capable of wireless charging.
So we don't have the capacity.
What about Bluetooth? Well, setting up Bluetooth is a bit of a hassle, just a little bit, and there's always going to be latency issues, you know, it's never going to be perfect. But alas, if you really don't mind having no SD card slot for extra storage and having no 3.5mm jack, then we're not going to make those into important points. Alright, so basically, generally speaking, all you need is an overall usable phone. You don't need it for anything specific. You don't have a niche that you're chasing, I guess. You don't have a niche that you're doing. You are the average user who just wants a good experience with a phone. Awesome. We can do away with any other specific specifications. Now, we need to have a specific price point. The truth of the matter is, you don't need to buy an extremely expensive phone, but it pays to have a good one, really. A good phone, despite being pricey, can last you years. I can prove that. So for $800 more or less, just what exactly can you get? You can't really get the latest for cheap, so I'm either gonna have to give you a cheap, mid-range, or budget phone, or I could give you a flagship model from a year or two ago, maybe 3 or 4 max. Honestly, I would 100% prefer a slightly older flagship phone. They are flagships for a reason, you know, they last, they're strong, they're buff. So, first off, we have the Samsung S22 Ultra. Now this is a bit of a mixed bag for me. Samsung has been having issues with their phones, you know, the screen, most especially the screen, with the lines and all that. It's quite weird though that those issues haven't really been making waves in the news, but oh well. If you're worried about it, I suggest you skip to the next phone, but if you're not worried about it, I'll talk more about it. So, the S22 Ultra, you have a wide array of options for this phone. From 128GB of storage coupled with 8GB of RAM to 1TB coupled with 12GB of RAM. It's got an LED screen like most other phones nowadays, and it's capable of 120Hz refresh rate as well. What about the cameras? Well, it has 4 back cameras if you're interested. a single 108 megapixel wide camera, a 10 megapixel 3x optical zoom camera, another 10 megapixel optical zoom camera but with 10 times optical zoom, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. Now as for the front camera, you have a 40 megapixel one. All back cameras except for the ultra wide have optical image stabilization, which provides stability for your cameras, while the ultra wide has super steady video mode. Those are different things. Its chipset is the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, which is still a powerful offering for today's standards. It also has an S Pen if you're into that sort of thing, you know, like drawing and taking notes with your pen kind of thing. As for the battery life, it has a 5000 mAh battery with 45 watts of charging and is also capable of wireless charging. Now basically, you can expect it to last you at least 1 to 2 days without charging, especially if you're not doing a lot. Moving on, we have the Pixel 7 Pro, the Google Pixel 7 Pro. I only realized that Google made phones like a year or two ago. Like, when I found about that, I was, Huh? They made phones? Anyway, I think this is the phone that my video editor uses, though I might be wrong. If you're listening, buddy, please confirm that. I think Pixels are cool as well. Now, this phone isn't a premium phone. It's not as premium as the S22 Ultra. However, I like having a stock Android skin or phone or operating system, whatever. I think it's cool because of that, you know, stock Android. Anyway, basically, this phone uses just Android. No fancy UI skin, no One UI or whatever, no over-the-top branding. It's just Android. I mean, to be fair, Google makes Pixel phones and Android phones have lots of Google apps on them, so I guess that's already part of the branding. Either way, Pixel phones are very great, honestly. It uses a Tensor G2 processor, which is not really as powerful as the previously mentioned Snapdragon processor on the S22 Ultra, but who cares? Honestly, for your daily needs, you're really not going to see a lot of difference between them. It has an LED screen, long-term software support, and you don't need an SD card slot if you're going to take lots of photos and videos because you can store all of that in your Google account free of charge with no size limits. That is the plus side of having a Pixel phone. As for storage and RAM options, you have a minimum of 128GB of storage with 8GB of RAM to a maximum of 512GB of storage with 12GB of RAM. As for the cameras, you have a 50 megapixel wide camera, a 48 megapixel telephoto camera with 5 times optical zoom, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. The front-facing camera is a 10.8 megapixel camera. However, despite having a similar battery size with the S22 Ultra, the Google Pixel 7 Pro does not have as much endurance, but it can still last you a day at the very least. Moving on, we have a OnePlus phone. What about a OnePlus phone? Maybe that's more up your alley. The OnePlus 12R might be enough for your needs. It's got a more recent Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor, an LED screen, and a fair set of cameras. 50 megapixel main camera, 8 megapixel ultra-wide, and a 2 megapixel macro if you want to get close and intimate with your subjects, like an ant or a flower or whatever. You lose out on the telephoto camera if you want to do like the zoom shots or something. As for storage options, you get 128GB with a maximum of only 256GB of storage. RAM options vary also, but the maximum you can get is 16GB. Unfortunately, you'll be stuck with a total of 256GB of storage with no way to increase that with an SD card. What about the battery? It has a 5500 mAh battery, bigger than the phones we previously mentioned, and you can get quite the endurance with it. As for me, well, I think I'll have to stick with the S22 Ultra. As an average user, the camera suite is extensive and the cameras are great. All I have to worry about is having to buy one with a lot of storage. When I feel like gaming, I'm pretty sure the S22 Ultra can chug along with demanding games if need be. That is, if I game, but I don't really game on a phone. The battery life also suits me, and I can't stand going below 20%. Additionally, I think we can all agree that we just love keeping our phones charged up and ready to go, so go ahead, buy the S22 Ultra. I've placed links in the description below, but if you're feeling lazy and just want to whip out whatever kind of phone you've got, you can scan the QR code on the screen right now, and you can replace that chunk of junk you've got. You know what? I might actually get myself an S22 Ultra soon enough. Hopefully, I just need to get paid. Fingers crossed. Thanks for watching. You're all awesome.